remind me, because I think Dame Rumor has an apocryphal version, or maybe it isn't, that you were crossing the floor of an airport and you saw a book. Is this true? You saw a book that caught your eye, and you took the book on the plane. You had no previous thinking about doing the Nance or anything of the kind, right?
No.
And did you know about this book?
I was going to Wyoming, too, which is a state to the west of us here in New York. And it was, yeah, I had done a benefit for some friends where I had found these old sketches and rewritten them, these comedy sketches. And I was in the airport, and I was on my way to the Sundance U-Cross Writers Retreat, and I had no idea what I was going to write.
But, and you're supposed to do a project,
and you have to do something. You can't just sit there and watch the, watch the fracking.
Right.
You got to do something. So I was going through the airport, and I saw a book called Gay New York by George Chauncey, and I grabbed it, and I was on the plane, and I was reading it. You don't fly direct to Wyoming.
No, you don't.
What year was this?
This would have been about 2 years before I approached you, I guess. So it took me a while to write it. But I went off, and I was reading it, and I saw the word Nance. They said the burlesque balconies were frequented by the Nance element in a police report. And I went, oh, Nance, I remember that from the comedy sketches.
No, wait a minute. These comedy sketches were the original?
These are original stuff that I had surmised, rewritten. I talked to a lot of men over the age of like 60 who had misspent youths in burlesque houses, and I would ask them routines.
This is vaudeville burlesque stuff.
Yeah, real burlesque stuff that I would then wrote for this benefit, and then I was sort of putting them together in my head, and then I flipped on my computer, and someone had sent me a Bernice Abbott photograph of right around the corner from my house of the Irving Place Theater.
Oh wow!
And that was my screensaver. Was this old theater, because you could sort of see the building I live in the corner there. So I
even before you wrote the play.
Yes, I had just. It's all as Lorelei Lee says, fate keeps on happening. I mean, it just sort of all came together, and I just sat down and I wrote the first scene of the play, pretty much as it had wound up on Broadway, with a few changes here or there. And when it was done, and then I found a comedy sketch, Beat You Around the Corner, that went with it. And when I was done, I looked at it and I went, this is impossible to perform, let alone stage. And I said, who would ever do this part? And I thought, well, Nathan Lane could do it. And I said, but he'll pass. I have to come up with a list of like 5 other people. And then I wrote it, and that's how it began.
And you got it next.
Yes, Doug and I knew each other a bit, and had threatened to work together at some point, and then there was another play that I couldn't do, but then he sent
his?
Yes, and then he sent me this play and said, I think this is something special, and then I read it very quickly, and I agreed it was something special, and it was very, I don't want to say different for him, but it was.
Oh yes, it was.
I felt it was. I mean, it had, a great deal of wit to it, which is what you expect from him. But it was much darker, and it was, it was just so theatrical. And I thought, wow, if you could pull this off, it would be very exciting. And certainly, the character was incredibly complex, and it's certainly a time period I wasn't that familiar with, and I wasn't familiar with the idea of a Nance character in burlesque, and so all of that made it very exciting. And then when we finally talked about it, we had a lunch, and then he said that he sent it to Lincoln Center, and that they had loved the play.
What made you think that Lincoln Center was the right place to go? That's such an interesting choice.
I had a play that was not well received at all, that evidently everyone hated, according to the chat rooms. But that one play, Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, has turned out to be the linchpin of my entire career. Is everyone who loved it had power. Everyone who loved
interesting.
said, Andre said, I love that play.
I know.
Please tell me what you're doing next. And so I sent him the play and said, well, I'm talking to Nathan about this. Is this interesting to you? And he just got, you know, the theatricality of it. I mean, if Lincoln Center has a sort of hidden agenda, it is a great affection for just the history of theatrical gesture.
Yes, I think of all the people I know, he feels a responsibility in an odd way toward theatrical tradition. I mean, he's a very loyal
absolutely.
guy in that.
And he knew, and we had a meeting, and he would say, did this really happen? Did this really happen? And the more I said yes to everything, because I'm not actually that creative, I really had to have historical everything. And I love doing research. I'm a nerd that way. I love going to the library and going online now and reading police reports to try to get jokes from the arresting officers. And the more I did that, the more excited he became about it. And then I remember we said who would direct it, and they said Jack O'Brien, and I said, well, he's going to pass. So let's come up with a list.
Are you kidding? You're kidding.
Oh, of course I said it. Jack, you pass on everything. You're never available. You're barely available for this show.
I'm not available for this show.
You're
I'm being punched in.
You're actually a hologram.
But with creative stuff, when it's brand new like this, it's either sensational, so you suddenly think, oh, here's an opportunity, or as I thought, I've never really seen this before. This isn't just funny, which it is, or witty, which it is, or serious, which it is, or touching. It's also a vein, a historical vein that I had no idea about and think a lot of people like me had never seen before. It seemed like an opportunity to me.
The more research I did, I tried to click in with my memories of realizing I was gay when I was younger, which would have been the late 60s, early 70s, and what the information I was getting of what a gay life was going to be, which wasn't pretty.
No.
It was the punchline. People forget, to be gay was the punchline of every comedian's joke on every afternoon talk show. You couldn't have a comedian like Mike Douglas or Merv Griffin without doing a big gay joke at the end of it, in ways that you could never do now.
Right.
Never do. So I grew up knowing that I was wrong, I was a freak, I was an object of ridicule, but then the craziness on top of that of me laughing at it, because it was a funny line, and it was a funny joke. And I thought, if I can sit in that place, if I can get the despair and the loneliness and the fear with the absolute genius of the comedy, the so funniness of it, that would be great. It's so interesting talking to gay men in their early 20s now. I think the next generation after them will have none of a particular type of humor. They don't understand it. We went to go see a very famous drag artist who does old movies. A couple summers ago, we bumped into each other to see him, and there was no one under the age of 35 in that theater. And we said, we're the only people who get what he's making fun of and the style of it. I mean, you probably have to go to like someone recreating an episode of Dynasty or something for maybe people to get that sort of hilarious, great camp sensibility.
It's all changed so much too. I mean,
and so fast.
I mean, Larry Kramer, like many of us, has said to me over the years, you have to do something for your people. And I kept saying, the Irish are doing just fine without me. What are you talking about?
The Kennedys.
Exactly.
Come through.
But this didn't seem like agitprop to me. This seemed, I don't know. You must have seen the possibilities right away. And I want to know, basically, forgive me, because you just had come off a life-changing experience with the O'Neill in Chicago, with the Iceman Cometh, which fortunately we're about to see again, thank God, or some of us for the first time. You'd gone through some, maybe you don't think this way, some sort of transition. I felt that as much as I've loved and admired and known you over the years, you came into this process a different person. Is that wrong to say?
No, no, I think that's very true. And so it was sort of the perfect play to do after having had that experience, which was transformative. It was a because that play is so monumental, and what it asks of you is so enormous, and it was thrilling and terrifying and all those great things. And so I was in that frame of mind when, and thinking that but by then we had done readings and a couple of.
Were there readings before? Forgive me for saying this. There were readings before I got involved. Am I right?
Was
One
there?
or two?
There were in my living room. I do.
Oh, I did a reading in his living room.
I read everything in my living room.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, we did. But but then we did, and then we at Lincoln Center.
Then
with
we started
you,
the- yeah.
we did a
series of them.
2 or 3.
Yeah, I think
maybe.
3 of them.
And we learned a lot, and especially when we would have to do it in front of a small group of people, that was very interesting, and where we felt, oh, this could go further, or maybe we need another scene to explain why the main relationship breaks up and so forth, but and also in the kind of a search for who should play the other key part of Ned, which is crucial. And it was always interesting to me to see people get uncomfortable with the overt effeminacy of the character and the kind of the silliness. I mean, downright silliness. And then I would start to think, well, is it any different from some Restoration Sir Foppington Flutter
No,
or
it's
whoever
not. No.
that character?
Sparkish.
There's a little bit of it goes way back.
Sure does.
That character. And what was great about what Doug had written was there is a kind of innocence to it that kind of takes the onus off of all the double entendres and the sometimes sexual nature of what he may be discussing. There is a kind of innocence about it. Did I say that?
But there was also the time was so restrictive and so not, it was so verboten, the whole thing, that the thing that fascinated me was how vulnerable and almost naked the comedy scenes are, how honest and innocent they are, in spite of the fact that the cops are listening and ready to raid the theater. There is a curious kind of balance there between.
And yet, for years, it wasn't taken. It wasn't all that. There was that period of the 20s. What did
They call it the pansy craze.
The pansy craze. I feel one coming on right now.
I had to close the door because it was getting a little loud. In the 20s, every nightclub had a pansy, which was their Nance, which was their gay man. And if you read some of the things that they were saying, they were very out there comments, and they would tease the straight men in the audience relentlessly, awfully,
Embarrassingly so.
Yeah, just humiliate them, and the people just loved it, couldn't get enough. And then the Depression hit, and for whatever, the way the wind shifts, who can tell?
Yeah.
And then suddenly it was not
Funny anymore.
Yeah, maybe it was the Will Hayes, and movies somehow also seeped into sensibility in other art forms. I don't know.
Yeah, and then LaGuardia coming in and wanting to clean up New York, and I think
and also LaGuardia, who up until the moment I started working on the Nance was a hero of mine. I just thought he was one of the great.
All of us.
He was one of the great people of all time, and to know that
just based on the musical.
Just on the musical, actually on the place in the Greenwich Village, LaGuardia Place.
Yeah.
Based on that. To find out that he had this big Achilles heel and he had this complicated Catholic feeling about sex that messed him up, that he couldn't make any kind of comprehension that way, that people just be happy. That was interesting to me, and to write about it, and to take a hero like that and to really just, who is this guy? There are things that happen in real life that I would dare never put in the play, where LaGuardia would actually was a judge, and he would sit in on the night court when they would raid the burlesque houses and pass judgment personally.
Wow.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, did it ever? I mean, mainly it was about naked women and
Yes.
and trying to clean it up for
Yeah.
the World's Fair that was coming.
Right.
But because I mean, I realize that kind of character would have been a part of it, but in terms of the dramatic license of the play,
Yeah.
it does become an issue in this particular
It was
burlesque
plays-
house.
and it was on the list of things that they
Yeah.
were looking out for, was any portrayal of deviance or perversion on
Right.
stage. There was a World's Fair coming. Some say the smell was that the war was going to come, and that New York would have been a big port town, and they didn't want it to become the sort of meeting ground for
Gomorrah,
homosexuals,
exactly.
for Gomorrah on the Hudson. What's interesting, just in terms of gay history, is it's actually World War II that brings all these gay men from around the world, from around America together, who meet each other, and that is actually the beginning of the gay movement, is actually with men serving in World War II.
And what made you decide to make him a Republican?
You look
Because many
for
people brought it up.
Yes, they did.
It was a big.
Did they?
It was.
It was
yeah.
hot.
It was more upsetting than anything was that he was Republican.
I wanted to find the voice of the Republican Party from the 1930s and to find the resonance for today, but to also have it be as pure as I could make it for what in a late 30s Republican was, which was also much more about self-determination.
But it certainly made sense to me. But it's in the way I was sort of building this character and his backstory, and I everything was hard won for him that he had
Yeah.
to do on his own, and he wasn't given any help, and so that made sense.
This is a play amongst many things. It's also about people pulling together for each other and standing up for each other. And Chauncey says at the beginning of it, watch out, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. They're going to tear you apart and they're going to spit you out. And the heartbreak is the scene where he realizes that none of the unions will stand by burlesque, which was something, as I was doing research, I found out that suddenly none of the unions, there was a big rally where Helen Hayes spoke and Tula Bankhead spoke, and that all the unions were going to shut down. And I thought, that's so exciting, the idea of a day without show business, And I could not find the reason why it happened. So I made it what was going to be the problem of burlesque, which was the men in the balcony, was that he could bring that up and no one would stand by them then.
Well, that, since money talks, it's sort of interesting when you see when things get attacked and when they're popular or when they're allowed to happen and then they're not allowed to happen. In a situation like this where you think to yourself, okay, where was the power behind all of this? When they started to shut things down and they tried to clean up New York. It sounds great until you realize that a lot of your revenue is going out, the window. So what is it that we're selling here? Well, you're quite right, we're selling naked women. That's what gets men in off the street, and they want to see that.
Well, it would, but that was after, it didn't always start that. It didn't start that way. I mean, there were always beautiful ladies, but the tradition of it started with, it was more like a musical stories based on old Greek myths,
Yeah,
and
sure.
starting with the troupe that came over of
They were English girls,
Lydia,
English women.
English women, and they were dressed as men, and men were dressed as women, and it goes way, way back, and was such and was the spawning ground for some of the greatest comedians we've ever had. From
So that was so.
Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, that was so fascinating for me. Was
Phil Silvers.
when I started doing the research, I knew all those routines. I knew jokes. I knew the rhythms. And I knew them all from television when I was a
Right.
kid. They would have variety shows.
Milton Berle.
And they would do Meet You Around the Corner in a half an hour on the Jackie Gleason
Yep.
show from Miami Beach, full color. And so I had it indoctrinated in my
Sure.
head. It was.
But I think most people, when they think, who don't know burlesque,
Yeah.
they think naked women.
Yeah, they
That's
do.
what they,
Yeah.
that's all they think of. And
Yeah.
and I think as time went on, that was a way of drawing people in, obviously. But it was always a cheap form of entertainment that was hugely popular for years
It was
until
it was
you know
working class,
these
yeah.
waning years in the
Yeah.
late 30s when it finally ended.
And there are things that happen after the Nance, which hilarious research things I found, was that the theater people were so infuriated by this, the actual legit theater people, that they put on burlesque shows in Broadway theaters. And there's one called like Bring On the Girls, which Lindsay and Krause, the
You're
guys
kidding.
who brought you Sound of Music
Sound of
and Life
Music,
with
right.
Father, wrote a play which has a wraparound plot, but it's actually just a burlesque show in the dead middle of it.
Wow.
And it's about soldiers going to see a burlesque theater and looking for Nazi spies. That old chestnut.
Oh,
My
And
God.
then,
looking for Nazi spies.
Yeah.
well, they
there
were
you go.
everywhere. They were everywhere. Matter of fact, so there was a play called Trio,
Yes.
which had a lesbian subplot,
Yes, it
which
did.
played the burlesco, and that was the first legit play that was shut down by LaGuardia.
And then what about Mae West? What about Sex? That was shut down.
That was in the 20s. That's back in the 20s. But the first one that was shut down by LaGuardia.
Oh, okay.
And that's when the theater community just had it. And they said, you cannot shut down our plays. You can, but they got away with two. And then, of course, Billy Rose came in with Stars and Garters, which
That's right,
played
Stars
the
and Garters,
Imperial,
yeah.
which was nothing but
Yeah,
a strip show.
Listen, something we've never discussed in our checkered past here, and I wanted to know, we've never really responded to it either, is that when we were first working on this material, and we would have a couple of readings, and I remember you and me particularly going through this in horror, where we would do a reading, and then we had to do another one. But in the second reading, the second time we did it, a lot of the same people came back, like because they got the staff
Yeah,
or something,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
And a lot of the people came back, and we died like dogs. And oddly enough, I remember how painful that was, but oddly enough, it was incredibly instructive to me, because it was in the depths of that awful period where we had never heard these jokes before. Suddenly we'd heard them and they weren't funny anymore, that I began to see the profundity that was going on in the play itself, which is not that it works when it works, it's what happens when it doesn't work, and where so much of that play was being lived on the edge of that kind of experience where you weren't really working very well. It wasn't going.
So this is the first time you worked on something that didn't get laughs? Because we need to work again. And so,
No, but then
you
it
know what
also
I mean.
informed. Yes, yes, what you're saying is true. It pointed up other things in the play, but
It
it
did.
also gave you an idea of the people who are doing these 2 or 3 shows a day, where people don't laugh. There are guys out there who are there just to see the ladies.
That's exactly
and they
right.
don't care about these
They're not
old,
even listening.
these old sketches.
No.
And so that the way you play that and not being so dependent on getting that kind of
Right,
feedback,
right.
and
what you do to-
informs the style of it, and but also, when we did play to real audience, to Broadway audiences, it was interesting to see how they would find their way into it, and how the people who are uncomfortable with that initial high, simply high, that is like, oh boy, we're really going there, are we? And then some people were shocked. The matinee ladies, they went right with it. They were like, yeah, well, give us some more of that.
they had a nephew.
They all had a nephew. No, they got the spirit of it
they
in a
did.
way, whereas some audiences were much more politically correct, and
Yep.
this is wrong, this should not be done.
Right.
I mean, you used to have, there was a sketch that we
Yeah, there was a
we
sketch that I cut that was
The Uncle
too-
Tom's
that we
sketch?
were going to do in blackface.
Yeah, because I
Well,
wanted to just say, I felt in the middle of the first act, so now you're comfortable with that. Let's see how you feel about
Well,
this.
This, I know.
But then, there's a part of me that's a little impish, I admit, and you have to say, no, not now.
Can't do it, yeah.
What I'm proud of is that things turn at the end of, from the moment Chauncey enters that last sketch, the Frankenstein sketch. the jokes become actually derogatory to gay men from then on for the rest of the show.
Yes, they do.
In a way that they never are. What I liked about the Nance, when I would hear these old sketches or find videos of them or anything I could find, is that the Nance somehow always triumphed, was always in control, and was
Vindicated.
Oh, completely. He would, and there was one I saw where he got the guy literally straight man, so confused. By the end, the straight man goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm afraid I have no choice but to sleep with you now." And they walked off together.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Like, that was so crazy, and the audience must have died. It was so funny. But I was so interested in when it stops being nice and it starts getting, that they're still funny, but it's really derogatory. They start talking about, hanging gay people. They start talking about beating them up. They do like every old embarrassing joke about gay men.
And it was you, and I think it was your idea that Chauncey sort of turns on the audience.
Yes. Yeah, I thought there was a moment when, in the second confrontation with the audience, when you were supposed to do the reprise of the song,
Yeah.
where they didn't like you and you finally couldn't take it any longer. I love the idea.
And when he goes off script and just
Right, and I love the idea of you being booed. Chauncey being booed,
Yeah.
I thought was fascinating to see what would happen at that time. We did add that after. The other thing I want to say that also I don't think we've talked enough about, because we haven't had enough experience now. We have the live experience that we created, and we did it for the camera, but that's now the next chapter. And what happened to me was, as a director, sitting in the theater, watching the play start, ebullient, bouncing, nasty, funny, risky, but very, very comic. And all those funny numbers right in a row, and then it getting darker and darker and darker. Where, as you say, watching an audience in the theater take all that in and begin to change. The difference with a camera, which I loved and never occurred to me, is right from the beginning. We sit in the theater, I'm the director, I know where the joke is, I know where the response is, that's where I'm looking. I'm trying to support you, and I'm trying to make you part of that whole situation. But when that number is done, my focus goes to the next character, because that's what the writer has written. The audience doesn't always do that. They choose who they're going to respond to. And the camera does the same thing. The camera shoots your joke, and then what? You won't stay there. We have to have a reaction shot. So the director doing the shooting is picking up resonances of things that you might not see on the stage at all if you're looking at the big picture. That was a revelation to me, because right from the beginning, it's not just funny. Not right from the beginning, the responses, the reactions, the fear of the men in the Horn and Hardart, when the siren goes by, all of this sort of stuff says to you, wait a minute, it's not just funny. There's other stuff. That threnody is running straight through the show. And it's a completely different experience on camera, I think. Love that.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. And the intimacy of it is, it's interestingly more intimate in a way than it is in the than it was in the theater.
Yeah. Even the early scenes between you and Ned, the beginning of that relationship, which is charmingly and very wittily and hilariously portrayed at the top. It's got a lot of other colors in there that really comes through on the camera.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, the arc of the show in the theater was from bright burlesque down the chutes, and then to a kind of honesty that I don't think I'd ever seen before in this material. On camera, it's cross-cut with enough melancholy or enough danger that I think you're always aware of it, and I think it's going to...
Yeah, I was always surprised when people... It's just people don't want things to be serious. People don't confront me. I got enough problems.
That's right.
And and you think, really? You really were that shocked that this went the way it went? Because, in the very first scene, he says, you could come home with me, you could do this, or you could walk away and never look at my ugly face again. And I think, if that didn't tell you where this was going,
Yeah.
then you ain't listening.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting. People, they think burlesque and it's
gonna be silly and
it's
funny.
going to be fun, but I mean, it's all there.
Our culture is wired for a happy ending. We need it. We need it. We will put it into anything we see.
It's where the money is.
It's where, look at any movie ever made, not independent, and it's a happy ending. And as Dorothy Parker said, nobody in life has a happy ending. Everybody dies. There are no happy endings. It's interesting is that as where I am as a writer now, for whatever that is, I'm not interested in calming people down. I'm interested in saying, this is what I see.
Well, that's an
Do you
interesting.
see this too?
That's an interesting point. Has this changed your philosophy?
Well, I was always, any play I wrote had a happy ending that was, is that happy? The Little Dog Laughed, which is probably my most seen play, ends with a complete fabricated relationship and all the characters saying relentlessly, we're so happy, it's a happy ending. Happy, we're happy, are we happy? We're so happy. And the audience still smiles and applauded. Because it was like we kept saying we're happy even though we're not, Hey. I'm excited with the idea of this being seen by so many people.
Me too.
And for them to take this experience with them, this wash of this period, and this wash of, there is such a thing as the gay experience, which is not what happens at sleepaway camp. There actually is a gay experience that it's part of the American life. It is part of who we are as Americans, whether you're gay or straight. That we were in the struggle and we were a part of this life. And we were there. We were there. There seems to be a feeling that gay people showed up somehow in 1967 with floral shirts and striped pants and casseroles and parties.
And adjectives.
And adjectives and eyebrows. And and calling each other women's names, but the reality.
And irony.
And irony.
Oh.
Yes. But
Oh, Mrs.
Yes.
but the fabulousness of like that they've been, it's been a part of our culture and our life for so long.
Also, this is like re-examining something most of us lived through. Many people didn't. I have a lot of young friends who experienced the Nance and were like open-mouthed, thinking, I had no idea that this was going on. I had no idea that this was the backstory of where we are today. And of course, for those of us in my generation, we've lived through all manifestations of it, from the 50s on, from Stonewall and the raids and all the rest of it, to marriage and equality and children. And I mean, it's hard to accommodate all of that has happened to our culture. What about the laughs? I mean, I do think sometimes when I look at where humor was in the 20s, my father was a great storyteller. He did accents. He made fun of the Irish. He made fun of the blacks. He made fun of the Russians, the Jewish, everything. He had a story. People, tears streaming down their faces. It's all gone now.
And kind of dialect comedy.
It's
and
gone.
It was a
Yeah,
huge
It's
part
totally
of burlesque.
gone. You can't do it.
Yeah. Dutch comics.
Dutch comics.
Dutch
Who were
comics.
cheap. That was their big thing, was the Dutch were always cheap.
Right.
Dutch treat.
Yeah.
And even back into Eric Blore and Franklin Pangborn and those characters in the Rogers Astaire musicals that were gayer than Gwiffs and hilariously funny, and yet somehow outside the parameters. Now that material is still funny in the same way. Are we going to lose all this, do you think? I'm not sure.
I think that I think the key word, and you said it earlier, is innocence. That this was a first generation of immigrants. And you could be in Manhattan and be in a section of Manhattan, and it was the German part of town. and
Right.
it was the Chinese part of town, and it was the Italian part of town.
Yeah.
So these were the accents you were growing up with, and everyone was mangling this language and trying to figure out this common language.
And thought everybody else was funny.
And they thought they themselves were funny.
Yes, they
also.
did.
That's why we got Sid Caesar, you know, who was able to do,
Yes,
gibberish, dialects.
And make them funny.
Yeah.
So good at it. And did
I
he
mean,
work
he
in a-
carried it on into the 50s.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. I think that there was an innocence in the presentation of gay life or a gay person in the Nance that you can be offended by a little bit, but after a while you just sort of succumb to it. Just go, oh, he's so sweet. And you can point to any of the characters on television now who certainly are Nancy.
It was a really rich, rare, and unique experience. And it was the intimacy of it. Also, we had that extraordinary set, which was a rabbit warren, which we had to learn how to maneuver before we could even figure out the play. We could even address your problems.
Plays, we were like, I remember the first day there was just people walking around a room going, they'll talk eventually, right?
I remember saying to you at one point after a run through, we're not going to be able to do this. This is going to be, I can't get into drag in less than 60 seconds.
So I say to Joey Pesci, longer dance number.
Yeah. That it was so,
Which, in magical way, a couple of people said that a favorite part
of
the show was
when
the
that
dance.
sort of angry
The dance happened, it was gross, and then you suddenly saw the ultimate expression of effeminate.
me.
Feminine.
Those at a
things that
lamppost.
Those are just things that you can't count on. Sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not. And if the spirit is with you.
And part of that interesting part of that kind of, when you would make us go through the whole thing, because that's the only way you would get a sense of what this roller coaster was going to be like. And there was that thing in the Hortense monologue where you had written, and I kept saying, well, this is important, and something has got to happen here, where you said, when he says Ned's name, who happens to be one of the three characters, Fred, whatever, and Ned was and he says it, and that all that you wrote was, this stops him for a moment. And I kept thinking, okay, yes, I get it. And what is that going to be? And it was because we had gone through these run-throughs, and by the time I got to that point, I was so sort of exhausted and emotional.
Beaten down.
And emotional, I just broke down and cried one day, and you said,
that's it.
and it was like, of course, this is where it's not in the scene previous where he's lacerating to him. That's where he loses it all.
That's also the universe.
Is on stage.
That's the universality. We're all performing for each other all the time, and we try to maintain the characterizations. We try to be consistent and honest about them. But occasionally, you just can't. And that is dramatic. When somebody who is a professional performer putting on something else that's painful hits a brick wall, man, that is amazing. And you can't ask for that. You can't count on it. You have to find your way to it and then honor it. And that's where we all were coming from our own circuits to this experience, which maybe 5 years earlier we might not have gotten there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have had the courage, frankly.
I don't think I could have, even if I had whatever talent I have now, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have written it because of what was just going on in the world. I
think that's right.
I did feel that as we were rehearsing it, like as it happens, say, states were passing, legal people in black robes were saying a gay relationship is equal to a straight relationship.
I didn't think I'd live to see that.
And that was happening, and what this is about, this play, if it's about, this is about when you tell someone that they're less than normal, what do they think of themselves?
Exactly.
And what choices do they make in their
And
lives?
what do you expect?
And what do you expect? And this is so, that it was even more, that so many people would come up to me at the end of the play when I would stop by to see it. Strangers would come up and say, couldn't they run away together?
I know.
Couldn't they go to Canada?
I know.
Can't they go to England? Couldn't they?
They wanted a happy. They
why
wanted a
did-
happy ending.
Why didn't he go on tour?
Well, so Johnny Orsini, who's going to turn that down? You know, I mean,
Well, I know that was a
That's-
lot of that was a
that was
sort of
a talk about a gift.
Well, yeah, but that was also it was that argument. Well, why?
Yeah,
how would you do that? Why would you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
You know.
And what? Yeah, that came.
Or
up.
would that ever happen?
That would never
You bet
happen.
it would
You bet
That
it
would
would
never
happen.
happen. Like he would never. He'd be lucky to have that relationship. Why doesn't he? He's like, do you not understand how this person loathes
No,
himself
no.
and says they are not worthy of it?
It was sort of
And we'll start, have they never dated in New York? This is Doug Beane, the Bachelor years in the '80s. Every guy I went out with was like, "What?" I go like, "I'm a catch. Come on."
I know. But we all the realization generation. And that's the other great thing that hit me amazingly. That Ned, it was very clear at the end that Ned, broken as he was, would go on.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
And
find
thrive.
and what a great experience, what a great first relationship to have had, what an education he had, and he could cook. You
I
know?
know.
And then suddenly,
And
so
the
he
next
becomes
generation,
he's
I
going to
mean,
have
Yeah.
all the happiness that this man couldn't conceive.
So many people.
What is that line?
Yeah.
What is that line? It's not what I'm. What did you say in the breakdown?
I'm built
It's not what I'm
he
supposed
says,
to have.
It's not what I should be having.
It's not what I
Well,
should
that's the most tragic line in the play.
in the play.
It's not what I should be having.
Holy
Just
mo-
always killed me.
Which is also
know, blackout.
convoluted
Yeah,
English,
yeah.
crazy, but so truthful.
But that's the axis where some people can go forward and some people can't. And you think he's never, as we did, he's never going to get out of this theater, which in our version he doesn't do.
Did anyone say anything to you about the show that surprised you? That just said, what? I never thought anyone would think that, or say that, or feel that, or put something in a way that succinctly summed it up in a way that you hadn't thought.
I'm not sure directors get those comments. I am not really.
Do you think people are afraid of you because you're a director?
Well, no, fear is not the right word, but there's a, I don't know. I think they're more inclined to speak to the writer or the actor. I don't think people know what a director does anyway half the time. I really don't. I don't think the critics do, for one thing.
Well, yeah.
And so, no, I don't get
Look,
those questions. Did you?
No, I mean I know that people were moved by it and surprised at the direction it took and you know I certainly a lot of people were certainly the emails I got and people who would come back and make a point of coming back to say how incredibly touched they were by the play and you know I think it was a hard play for people. Because it doesn't let you off the hook.
No, and that is in fact that is the comment that comment's the wrong word. That's the report I got. That this was a piece that people went out of the theater and talked about for the rest of the evening and sometimes well into the week ahead with the people that saw it.
It's uncomfortable at times. It
And-
becomes uncomfortable.
And stuff gets stirred up in you.
Joe Mantello said he wanted to go home and take a shower after it brought up a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you know, and obviously yes, it was moving and funny, but
No, but it haunts you.
there is a haunting
The piece haunts you.
nature to it.
It didn't occur to me at the outset that we'd end up here discussing this, being prepared for a film, experience.
Never.
It never occurred to me. And I have to say how proud I am that
my
at
God.
this juncture in our lives, because we didn't take it because it was safe, we didn't take it because it was going to be a surefire anything. We took it because we three were moved by it, we were involved in it, and it spoke to us. And that was as far as it could go, as far as I knew.
Yeah.
And that fact that these months later, we're sitting here having this filmed discussion and still sorting through ourselves the values, how it happened, it's pretty astonishing. And Good for you.
I just now am editing the script with Dramatist Play Service for different productions of the show.
Wow.
And going through and finding lines and going, boy, do I hate audiences that I would put that line in for them that they have to digest. Boy, do I love people. Boy, do I hate people. Boy, to go through and going, I don't know how you're going to, and to know, and just, I just said at the top, like, this is what Jack did, and it's brilliant, but do what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do your thing. Come with your take on it.
Yeah, I mean,
have
look,
a blast.
You can only get this kind of a production at Lincoln Center.
Oh my
I have to
gosh.
say.
Oh
I mean,
my
because to
gosh.
do this commercially would have been.
I don't think anybody would have done
No.
it.
wouldn't
No,
have happened.
because it's too risky and it's not a feel-good evening, and it's wildly expensive. But you had that John Lee Beatty set and Ann Roth costumes and Jaffe's work,
Lighting,
the
yeah.
lighting.
I love the
you know,
lighting, yeah.
spectacular.
It was great.
And the music.
And the music by
Glenn-
Glenn Kelly.
Glenn Kelly's music is so
Perfect.
It was so I loved when it started. You felt everyone going, "Oh, what's this from?" And
I
then going,
know.
"Oh, it's from this."
Yeah, I
Like
know.
it, but you feel like, "Oh, it's that."
This is a real score, I know.
it was
and
to
Joey
have a pleasant
Pesci making
score.
all these disparate people look like a company.
Oh, yeah.
Dancing together.
Yeah, great,
Divine.
great work.
No, you're quite right.
And-
It was tiny and lavish.
Yeah.
And I loved that the girls were actually the names of girls who played the Irving Place Theater.
Is that right? I'd
yeah,
forgotten that.
Yeah, they were actually the real names from the police records.
Really? Sylvie?
And their acts, remember that there was that wonderful moment with Ann Roth when it says here Carmen Del Rio dances in a white dress. Why white?
Yeah, she
And I
was-
said, because that's what it said in the police record when they arrested her. She goes, okay, you're going to have to talk to the lighting designer. But I
Yeah,
did
that's
that
interesting.
so that you can change it, obviously, but I wanted to have that feeling of
This is where it
who
came
people
from.
were. And I learned to, Sylvie's adventure is, in this story, is so meaningful to me because it is what I see so many people of the left go through
Yeah,
in
it's
their
true.
lives, is you think it's this. But and this is where at the end you either go right wing or you go left wing or you just don't care about anything anymore. But it's that turning point where you just realize it ain't gonna be, it's not everybody linking arms and singing Kumbaya and marching. It ain't gonna be that.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And as we always used to say in rehearsals, like, don't worry, Sylvie, soon it'll be the 50s, and then you'll be blacklisted for everything you did today. You won't, even if you're in show business, you won't be working.